learned a lot. My wife, she's very close to her family, and I think I didn't appreciate my family enough before.
Right.
And being with my wife and seeing the time and effort she dedicates to her family, I have learned kind of invest similar in mine. So I think my relationship's actually improved since being here.
Absolutely. Yeah, they always bring something good to you. You know, they bring good stuff, something you can learn. You can always learn from them.
Well, family, friends, you need to have that in your life too.
Exactly.
You can't, I mean, living without family or friends is kind of a hollow existence, really.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let me move on to this question I have, which is quite interesting for language lovers out there. Did you know any Spanish when you came to Chile, when you first arrived in Chile?
I didn't. I didn't know anything, really. I was really, really ignorant. In Australia, I don't know what secondary language they offer in schools today. When I was at school, we learned a little bit of French, but, obviously I forgot all of that now. But
right.
No, I didn't know anything, actually. I had a little book. I think it was a Daily Planet guide to South America that kind of had some phrases that I could memorize. But no, I didn't know anything. And
okay, so how did you go about learning the language then? Was it difficult for you?
Yeah, it was. I got here in October in 2010 to Buenos Aires, and I didn't know anything. So, but when you're traveling and going from hostel to hostel, everybody kind of speaks English.
Right.
But because I didn't know when I was going back to Australia, I wanted to learn the language because I didn't know how long I was going to be in South America, and I kind of left the opportunity open to be there indefinitely. So I didn't want to be one of those guys that lives in South America for 10 years and hardly speaks anything of Spanish. I wanted to speak really well.
So did you go to a school? Did you go to a language school here in Chile, or did you just go the self-taught way, like just learning by yourself?
In Argentina, my first week in South America I spent in Buenos Aires, and I was just kind of discovering and enjoying. And then I moved on to Salta, which is a small city in the north of Argentina, and I took 1 week of Spanish classes in Salta, but I didn't really feel that into because I was going out at night, I was partying and enjoying. I wasn't really focused, and then so I did this week of Spanish classes, but it didn't really seem that beneficial. And then I eventually went to Bolivia, and I had another week of Spanish classes, and
right.
Same thing, I wasn't really focused.
Okay, you weren't really into it. You were not really trying to learn the language.
I mean, I was, but I was also very interested in having a good time.
Exactly, just
traveling around. I wasn't studying or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, after about a couple of weeks of partying and enjoying, this new adventure, I decided to get a bit more serious about it, and I decided that the best way to learn the language was to focus on the conjugation of the verbs, because I felt that was kind of the base of Spanish. So
You really have to learn grammar. I mean, let's face it, nobody can get away with not sitting down and studying a grammar book when they're learning a second language.
I think a lot of people lose or waste time on little things. I think grammar is important, but you need to know there's some fundamentals you need to know, but you don't need to know. There's a lot of unnecessary things that people focus on at the beginning that's not really necessary. I mean, I think you need to pick and choose what things you need to learn, and that's what I did with my Spanish. I essentially found a website that had about still 700 different verbs in it, and it showed the conjugation for each subject for each verb.
Uh-huh.
For example, I mean, if you can imagine, this website had, like, for example, the verb abandonar, the verb to abandon.
Okay.
And it literally said, yo abandono, tú abandonas, él abandona.
Yeah,
I've been there. And then it went for, like to pass, abandoné, abandonaste, abandonó.
Right.
And I just literally just memorized.
Yeah, you were a very systematic learner. You were, like a very hardworking guy.
Well, I mean, I remember I was renting a little apartment in Selftaught in Argentina, and every night I read about. I just did this little exercise. I have the verb, and and I just read and memorize the verb, about 10 different verbs.
Right.
Every night. So after a couple of months, I had done this exercise where I'd get this verb and, como comes, come, comemos,
Right.
comen, comí, comiste, comió, comieron. And I did that, and after about a couple of months, I had done that for about 600 verbs. So I knew how to conjugate in different verb tenses.
Right.
So I knew how to say, like, mañana comeré contigo, something like that, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
ayer comí.
I did something really similar with my English. I learned English back in 2002, I think. And I got this little book from a friend of mine. He was actually a classmate of mine. His name was also Benjamin. I used to call him Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
Anyway, this guy had a very old book in his house. It was kind of like a dictionary, but not really. It was a dictionary that had like 16 lessons, lots of verbs and vocabulary, like 16 basic English verbs, like come,
Yep.
go, keep, stuff like that, and a bunch of examples for each of those verbs. And as you went through the lessons, not only did you learn new vocabulary, but you also learned how to use those basic verbs in different verb tenses. So that's what I did. I started doing that, and then at the very end of the book, you would get like a whole list of phrases in different tenses, including all of the verbs that you learned in the lessons, as well as the vocabulary. So that was pretty much the basics for me. After that, it was downhill. It was very easy for me to continue to learn the language, reading articles, doing a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I mean, that's because once you have that base, you can communicate, you know what I mean? You can ask a question and you can answer a question you can answer with an affirmation or a negation. So you have a base.
Exactly.
And then the rest, I mean, you learn the nuances.
Yeah,
conjunctions, connectors, articles.
Yeah, the rest is really a matter of practicing and, having little encounters with native speakers or other people whose passion it is to, just hone the skills, get better at.
Well, yeah, that practice was key. I mean, that's what I think is kind of prevents people from reaching high levels. They don't have access to practice. I was lucky because in South America, especially where I was living, and I kind of made it a point to kind of stay away from foreign people, English-speaking people, so I could practice. So that was the key. I mean, you can study all day and all night, but if you're not actually speaking and practicing with people in real life like situations, then you're not going to reach that level that you want.
That's right. I completely agree with you. The thing is that you also need to hear the stuff you've been learning. You need to hear the stuff in context. You need to, be challenged by native speakers sometimes.
Yeah, and I think I learned to stop kind of, at the beginning of my experience of learning Spanish, I used to always kind of question, why is that? Why? It doesn't make sense. I don't, why? And then I eventually just started to accept that. I think, okay, well, I don't really understand maybe at this point why it is like that, but I just accepted it. And then I found that, maybe a couple of months down the track or a year down the track, as my level grew, those things started to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's like experts say, you just got to learn it in chunks and absorb the concepts rather than each individual word. It's much better to just get the whole chunk or phrase and put it through your head. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, in addition to difficulties experienced with the Spanish language in Chile, what else was difficult for you about coming to live in a different country? In this case, in Chile? Well,
when I came in 2010, and I stayed for about 2 years, traveling to different countries, to Chile, to Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, working in bars, teaching English as a security guard. I mean,
you've done pretty much all kinds of jobs.
Different jobs and kind of traveling and working, and I did that for 2 years, and I made a lot of friends in Chile. Actually, in Concepcion, I'm in Talcahuano. Actually lived in Talcahuano for 6 months.
Wow.
During my 2-year backpacking adventure with a friend that I met in Bolivia, now a Chilean guy.
Right. That's pretty exciting, huh?
Well, Talcahuano is not the most exciting place, but I mean...
Yeah, but traveling around and making friends and all of that, it's definitely...
Oh, it was fantastic. It was one of the best experiences of my life. And when I eventually decided to go back to Australia in 2012 in December, I really had to go back because I didn't really have any money, and I couldn't become financially independent. I was working, but I wasn't making enough, and so I decided to go back to Australia, and the idea was to look for a job as a journalist again. But when I got back, and obviously I hadn't worked for a couple of years, nobody was really interested in hiring me.
Yeah, that's true. You know, it's a risk you take. Once you leave your home country, you leave a job behind, you leave a lot of things behind, and also it's like you risk disappearing off the face of the earth as far as those people are concerned.
Well, and I was faced with the reality of going into a career or a direction that I didn't want to go, like public relations, communications, because there's always more jobs in that area than actually working in newspaper. So, you know, I had to do something, and I didn't really want to. I'm very passionate driven. I can't really do a job that I'm not passionate about. I mean, there's people that can wake up every day and go to a job that they don't really like.
Yeah, that would be a very sucky situation to be in.
Oh, but people do it. I mean, most people do it, actually. I mean, that's the reality for probably 95%.
The thing is that once you realize that you have big financial obligations, you just need to find a job. No matter what that is, you just got to do a job and, you know, bring an income. Put some bread and butter on the table. Yeah,
so this was in 2013. In January or February, I think, I made the decision to return to Chile. Because I had some friends that I could live with, and I decided that I would start an English company.
Right.
And I returned in 2013 in March, and I started working towards creating this English company.
That's great that you mentioned that, because that brings me to my next question, which is about your school. You know, your Australian Language Institute.
Well, the actual company that I created at the beginning was called Blomfield English.
Blomfield English. Blomfield is your last name, right?
That's true, yeah. Bloomfield, yeah.
Right. Okay, how did that go?
Oh, it was okay. I mean, at one stage, I had around 75 students, 3 or 4 different teachers, and the company was certified by Sensei. We could give courses in big companies. And
Were you hiring local teachers?
I think most of my teachers were. I had a couple of girls from United States,
right?
And I think most of them were. There was one guy from Ireland, I think, but most of them were from the States, if I remember correctly.
Right. Okay.
And then eventually, I think the accreditation for the Sensei certificate was getting quite difficult to maintain, so I decided that I would not continue with Sensei, and the company, it still exists today, actually, and I've got my students all through the company, but I decided that I would like to start up a kind of a side project.
Right.
So there was a couple of Australian guys living in my neighborhood here in Santiago.
Okay.
And I just kind of mentioned to them one afternoon, why don't we start an English company that offers Australian English?
Right.
Because there's a lot of people going to Australia to study or to work, and they're not getting kind of help with the accent and the slang.
Exactly. So when did you decide to start that company?
It was actually last year.